When you think about this part of the world, your mind probably jumps to epic stories of empires, energy, and conflict. But to really get it, to understand any of it, you've got to look past the headlines and dig deeper, right down to the land itself. You see, for thousands of years, everything here has been shaped by two very simple things: sand and water. It sounds crazy, right? But believe it or not, almost 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was lush and green, and the story of how it turned into the desert we know today, well, that's not just some ancient history. It's the event that kicked off everything that followed, from the very first cities to the global challenges we're facing right now.
The whole history of this region is a story of contrasts. It's this constant push and pull between two powerful forces. On one side, you have these immense, life-threatening deserts, and on the other, the precious, life-giving water that holds them back. That fundamental tension, that's the key to everything.
I mean, just look at these two realities sitting side by side. You've got the Sahara and the Arabian Peninsula, these enormous deserts where summer temps can hit 130 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you have these legendary rivers, the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. And here's the wild part. These rivers didn't just happen to be near the desert. They became the cradle of civilization because the land all around them was so incredibly harsh.
So how exactly did that green grassland just vanish? Well, it's a process called desertification. Around 5300 BCE, the weather patterns started to change. The rains shifted south, and slowly, over centuries, that vibrant landscape just dried out, forcing entire populations to pack up and move in a desperate search for water.
And that search for water? It led them straight to these great rivers. This is where humanity didn't just find a way to survive. They started to innovate. They figured out how to harness the water, and in doing that, they basically invented a whole new way of life: farming and building permanent homes.
Think about it for a second. In a land defined by scarcity, these rivers weren't just a nice feature. They were everything. They were your drinking water, your food source, your highway for transportation. They were the literal foundation that the first great cities and empires were built on.
So what was it about these specific riverbanks that made them so perfect for growing food? Well, it all starts with a geographic feature called an alluvial plain. It's pretty simple. It's just the flat land right next to a river that floods.
But the flooding itself was the real magic ingredient. See, when these rivers flooded, they dropped off a layer of something called silt. Silt is just fine, nutrient-rich particles of soil. It's basically nature's perfect fertilizer, and it's what turned the dry desert soil into incredibly productive farmland.
So you get this simple but amazingly powerful cycle. The river floods every year, it drops off a brand new layer of this super rich soil, and bam, you suddenly have the perfect conditions to grow crops, right in the middle of a desert. This annual gift from nature is what created the famous Fertile Crescent.
And this predictable yearly gift of fertile land, it was a total game changer. It kicked off the agricultural revolution right here. For the first time in history, people could stop wandering and actually build permanent homes. That stability is what turned this region into a cultural hearth, a kind of incubator where civilization was born and its ideas started to spread.
Okay, so for thousands of years, water was the resource that defined everything. But in the modern era, a totally different resource started bubbling up from beneath the sand, one that would end up reshaping not just the region, but the entire planet: petroleum. Just take in that number for a second. 25%. A full quarter of all the known petroleum reserves on Earth are right here. That single fact explains so much about the economic and political power of the Arabian Peninsula today. It's a concentration of energy that's almost hard to wrap your head around. So what even is this black gold? Well, you can think of it as the super concentrated remains of tiny animals and plants that died millions of years ago when seas covered this exact same desert. All that time, heat, and pressure turned them into what we know as oil, which powers pretty much our entire modern world.
But here's the huge catch. Because it takes millions of years to form, petroleum is a non-renewable resource. That means once we use it, it is gone for good. And that simple fact creates a massive long-term challenge for a region whose entire modern economy is built on it. So, we've talked about the resources in the ground. But the region's power also comes from its location on the ground. It sits at the physical intersection of Africa, Asia, and Europe. It was basically destined to become a global crossroads for trade and travel.
So you have to wonder, how did anyone manage to cross these massive deserts? The answer is the oasis. These are these small, miraculous little pockets of water and life, and they're the essential refueling stations on the vast, sandy highways of the ancient world.
Without them, trade would have been impossible.
And these oases weren't just quick pit stops. People built inns, sometimes called caravan palaces, to serve all the traders passing through. And over time, these vital hubs grew from being simple shelters into permanent settlements, and eventually into bustling cities.
But the caravans that crossed these deserts carried more than just spices and silk. They carried ideas. And all this movement of people turned the region into an incredible hotspot for what we call cultural diffusion. Religions, technologies, languages, you name it. They were all exchanged here, spreading innovations that would literally change the course of history across 3 continents.
And all of that brings us right up to today. Because for all the modern focus on oil and geopolitics, the region's most fundamental challenge is the exact same one it has faced for thousands of years, the fight for water.
Listen to this quote from our source material. "The once fertile land is becoming desert." It's chilling, isn't it? It tells us that this ancient process of desertification, it's not just history. It's happening again, right now, and it's being sped up by climate change and drought. And this is not some abstract, far-off problem. I mean, look at what's happening to the Euphrates River. We're seeing such severe water depletion that this once mighty river is shrinking down to a stream in some places. The soil is cracking from the heat, making farming impossible. Livelihoods like fishing are just collapsing. And just like their ancient ancestors, people are being forced to leave their homes as the land becomes unlivable. And so that leaves us with this massive question. The region's ancient past was written in water. Its modern history has been fueled by oil. But as the rivers continue to shrink and the oil wells one day run dry, you have to ask, which one of these finite, precious resources will ultimately define this land's future?